That'll be great. Yeah. You all know me. I'm Caitie. I am the executive director of the Spark of Hudson, but I'm here tonight as a private citizen talking about a hobby that has grown to be something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is gravestone preservation. So why do we preserve gravestones? There's a lot of reasons we might do this. I'll talk about a few of them tonight, but I will. My daughter Poppy really likes to, yes. But I'll start off by telling you why I got interested in this several years ago. So my reasoning for preserving gravestones was pretty pragmatic. I was doing some work into the genealogy of my family, and I wanted to know more about them. I was born and raised in Hudson. My family has been here on my mom's side since the 1860s. It's a long time. And so we have dozens and dozens of family members that are buried in the local cemetery. And when I started looking into the stones to understand people's names and dates, many of them were too dirty to read. And so I learned how to clean them so I could get access to these names and dates and start to piece together our family's genealogy. And in doing so, really sort of fell in love with the practice. And this video here is from a few years ago. It's me cleaning one of my ancestor stones, a little boy, Jackie, who died quite young of polio in the 1920s, my grandmother's cousin. And I had both of my children helping me clean. This is right in Cedar Park Cemetery, right in town. And there's a lamb on top of the stone, which is a symbol of the death of a child. And yeah, I've really taken to this practice, and so have my kids over the years. And it's something that is part of my regular life now. And part of the reason why I wanted to show you this video at the outset is to show you this sort of family-oriented thing we've got going on, but also to show you this is the end product, right? It looks so good. So you take this stone and really restore it to its full glory with some elbow grease and the right product. So by the end of this little chat today, I hope that you'll understand how to clean stones yourself. And I'm also going to talk about myself a little bit because I have a captive audience. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about my interest in cemeteries. I'll talk more about Cedar Park, so the history of that cemetery, a few prominent local figures that are buried there. I'll talk more about why we preserve gravestones, materials that gravestones are made of, how to assess and repair gravestones, which is not something I do or know a lot about. And then we'll get into the cleaning part of it. And you can also leave today with a kit if you'd like. I have 6 extras from a course that I taught last year. So those are on hand. All right, so my interest in cemeteries, like I said, came from my time in Cedar Park. So I used to go to that cemetery a lot as a child simply because I was allowed to ride my bike there by myself. There's no traffic. And so once I turned 11, I was allowed to cross the Fairview Avenue, busy road on my bike. And we'd always go there with my cousins and we ride around on our bikes there. And we were really taken by this one stone shaped as a teddy bear for a child who died there in the 40s. And as kids, we didn't understand the gravity of the loss of a child. We just liked the stone shape, and it became sort of a landmark for us. We'd call each other up on our landlines and be like, let's meet at Baby Freddie's stone. And so this became a very sort of special stone to me over the years. I would always go back and visit it. And once I started caring for stones, I would care for this stone, even though I didn't know the child who it was erected for. And then 8 years ago, when I moved back to town, I started sending my daughter to the local daycare, got to know some people there, especially one teacher in particular that I became close with, named Laura. And we got really close a couple of years ago when my stepdad passed away because her dad had died around the same time when she was 34. And so she became sort of like a grief guide for me. We got really close and started spending a lot of time together. And then I was in the cemetery 7 months after my stepdad passed away, having a picnic on his grave. And my daughter, Poppy, who was 5 at the time, asked if we could go see Baby Freddie's grave. She was also very aware of this grave by then. And she was just learning to read. So we went over to the grave, and she was reading the inscription, and she said, Frederick Doty. And I had this moment where I was like, what? Because I had always just called him Baby Freddie since I was a child. And Doty is the last name of my friend Laura. And so I looked it up, and sure enough, this stone was a stone of her husband's brother. And so I had this experience where I'd been caring all my life for this stone and visiting it and not really knowing who it represented. And it was a stone of a dear friend who had become a dear friend and really had reciprocated that care without knowing. And so I tell that story because the more time I spend at cemeteries, I have more and more experiences like that, especially in a small city like Hudson. You find these connections, you have these moments of connection with people who are there to mourn or visit their loved ones. And I mean, it's become such an important part of my life. I really enjoy it. So in addition to having experienced riding around on my bike a lot there as a kid, I also have a ton of ancestors buried there. So this is my grandma standing next to the stone of her grandma and grandpa, Jacob Martin, who came here, Jacobe Matteo, and Johanna Mastrangelo. And all of their children's stones, they had 11 children, and they're buried all around them. That's why I didn't marry somebody from Hudson, because I'm related to everyone, and I don't even know. But yeah, I grew up going to Cedar Park regularly. My mom has talked about going to Cedar Park and having picnics as a child on these graves. Cemeteries are very comfortable for me, and I've spent a lot of time in them over the years. This is the stone of my grandpa and my great-grandma and great-grandpa. My son is like a few days old there, and I took him to meet his ancestors as soon as he was out of me. This is a stone of another ancestor, Leona, who also died quite young. I love this stone because the picture of her is so clear and gorgeous here. And this is the stone of my stepdad, who died 2 years ago. Him being there has given the cemetery new meaning for me in a big way. It's my daughter, Poppy, who I'm always afraid she's going to break it. She's climbing all over it. Yeah. So Cedar Park Cemetery is definitely where it all started for me, and I have throughout my life always found my local cemetery and become quite at home there. So I'll show you a couple of other pictures throughout this talk of places that I've spent a lot of time in other cities. All right, so first I'm going to tell you a bit more about Cedar Park Cemetery because it's a really special place. If you don't go there often, you should. It's huge. It's 88 acres. When they first founded it in the late 1700s, it was only 5 acres. It's expanded pretty significantly over time. It's really scenic, so it was influenced by the rural cemetery movement. This was the movement in the late 1700s that happened in response to a public health crisis. So people before this time were just burying their dead on their own land, in their backyards or in churchyards. And as cities became more densely populated, it became a health issue because people weren't getting buried deep enough. They were running out of room, essentially. So throughout America, they started creating these cemeteries that were intended to be parks. So that's why our cemetery is so gorgeous. It's like very winding. There's a pond feature. I think it's a level 1 arboretum. So there's lots of really gorgeous tree diversity there. It's lovely this time of year, like peak right now. So you should go and check it out.
Do you remember Margaret's Leaf Project?
I do. In 5th grade, I had to, yeah. Margaret was my 5th grade teacher, and I had to collect leaves from a shit ton of trees, lots of trees. And the way to cheat is to go to the cemetery because it had all of the different types of trees all in one place. There's also a lot of diversity within that cemetery, like a surprising amount. There's a lot of veterans that are buried there. There's a Civil War and a World War II memorial. There's even Confederate soldiers buried there, I think one that I know of. There's a Jewish cemetery that was established in 1888, which was like very progressive to do at that time in history. And actually just as recent as 2019, they added a designated Muslim section. So it's the only Muslim cemetery for like 100 miles. That was when Farooq Sultana died. That's when that got established. So yeah, there's a lot of different communities that are represented there. The first burial happened, the first person to be buried there was a woman named Phoebe Folger. She was buried there in 1784. She is the wife of Ben Folger, who was one of the proprietors who bought the land and then founded Hudson. Colonel John Van Allen presided over her grave and then died immediately after. So he was the second person that was buried there. Yeah, bummer. The Jewish section, like I said, was established in 1888. I cleaned a lot of the Jewish cemetery last year. It's so big. I don't know how many graves are in there, but I was hired to do that. The Muslim section was added in 2019. There's 130 graves there. I just heard that they've just asked the city to purchase more plots to expand it outwards. And there's a lot of military graves there as well. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, so these are some photos that I took at Cedar Park over the years. This is on Kelly Jahushik's Tales of the Crypt tour that she does every year. It's awesome. She tells a lot of cool stories about folks that are buried there. And I think that was last fall. So going to some prominent local figures. So Benjamin and Phoebe Folger, I already told you, Phoebe was the first person buried there. Benjamin was a proprietor. He also was the one who established the cemetery. Ben Folger also has like a really weird storied history. He actually lost a defamation suit to Sojourner Truth. He like slandered her. He said that she had murdered someone that she did not murder. And she won the case in New York State court, and she won. She got $125 in damages, which at that time was a lot of money. So these are they're pretty nondescript graves. This is a Paddock grave. He was another proprietor of Hudson. There was a group of, I think, 4 men who bought the land and established Hudson. Cornelia Theodosia Andrews is she's one of my favorites. She survived the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 and then came back to her home in Hudson. Her sister was also on the Titanic with her. I did a deep dive into her once, and she was like quoted being like, "None of the men knew how to row the lifeboat." And I was like, "Batty," which I really like. Yeah. Yes. And she also, I don't know if you've met, there's such a concentration of people that went to Oberlin in Hudson. It's a small liberal arts college in Ohio. And I'm always like, why are you all here? And they're all like, what do you mean? But there's just like a disproportionate number of people. And she went to Oberlin. And once I discovered that, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. She like opened the portal door to get them all here. And then this last guy, this is my favorite grave in the cemetery. His name was George Waring. He was a merchant. He operated a clock store on Warren Street, and he also maintained a community clock. The city of Hudson paid him $10 a year to run this like gas-powered clock that was the time that was kept. And he made this this sundial clock grave for his wife before she died, which is a little weird, but he also seems a little weird. And yeah, you can see the time at any time of day. I actually took this morning. The thing that I love about this grave is it's so goth. It says, "The last hour to many, possibly to you." A reminder of your own mortality all the time. So that's just a few graves. That's just 3 people. If you want to hear more, go to Kelly's talk. She goes on for literally 3 hours. I did it last year. It was really cool. But yeah, just this, I hope will entice you over there to see these graves. All right, so why do we preserve gravestones? So preserving local history and genealogy, this is what I was talking about earlier. It can really give you insight into your ancestry, to the dates, the names, the relationship to each other. It's a really rich history for families, especially families like ours that really just stayed in one place for a long time. Yeah, there's a lot of information that can be found there. This image here is the Black Angel that is in Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City. That's where I did my PhD. And it was rumored that if you touched this and were not a virgin, you would die. And so I never touched it. Yeah, I never touched it, Mike. Never touched it. Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful graves in that cemetery. Here's a couple of examples. Like, I love graves like this that are like, here are all the people, and there are dates. And like this that show relationships to each other, and then even sometimes have a paragraph about their achievements in life. It was this genealogy project was the reason why, like when my mom was getting headstones, I was like, I need the full date. Like our descendants will need the full date. So something to keep in mind.
You pay by the letter, so.
You pay by the, she was pissed. I was like, I'll pay for the extra letters.
Do you have to pay more, like it's deep? Like,
what, deeper in the ground?
For each letter.
what I mean is, like, I've always envisioned, like, I want to be like this deep so you can see it for a couple hundred years.
I don't think that you can do that, but you could try. I don't know, maybe if you're a county judge, you could do that.
Well, that one's kind of like a reverse because it's raised.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
raised
I
up.
see, deeper, oh,
Deeper in the stone.
in the
No, not
stone.
buried deeper. He
I thought he
meant-
meant buried deeper.
No. I meant like edged in.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't know. I haven't been on the market for a headstone yet. All right, why else might we preserve gravestones? They're also cultural artifacts that provide insight into our history collectively in a particular area. So, like I said, a lot of gravestones have like more information on them. You also can just step back in a particular community and get a sense of what that community is like by looking at gravestones. All of the same weird relationships that exists in a thriving, alive community exist in a cemetery too. You can see which names are repeated again and again, which stories mattered the most, which people had the most wealth. Last weekend I went to Tarrytown, to the Sleepy Hollow cemetery, and saw the Carnegie and Rockefeller crypts. Whew, they're really nice. They're very big, they're very beautiful.
Washington Irving.
And Washington Irving's, which is less
Oh, it was
nice.
very
nondescript.
very
Very Washington Irving. Yeah, it was cool. This picture in the background here is Cedar Park, right by the pond. It's really pretty. Here's a couple of examples of what I'm describing. So these are just quick inscriptions on a tombstone of what the person did. So this is the first Black woman to earn a medical degree. This is the diver who with his own hands saved Winchester Cathedral. I love reading people's gravestones and hearing what they've achieved. I've also come across some gravestones that have recipes on them.
Really?
What a good idea. Yeah, so you can like make a recipe that the person used in their lifetime.
Never heard of that.
It's pretty neat. All right, lastly, why preserve gravestones? The art and craftsmanship, and gives you sort of this window into the social history. So in a given place, what kind of art exists, what kind of craftsmanship, symbolism differs by culture and place. This isn't something I actually know a lot about. Like I haven't studied this extensively. Every now and then I'll Google like, what does this symbol mean? Why is this on a stone? What does an obelisk represent? But yeah, you see a lot of variability when you go to different cemeteries. The styles of the graves look different. This picture in the background is Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester. I went to the undergrad at the University of Rochester and I live right next to the cemetery. That's where Susan B. Anthony is buried. Frederick Douglass is buried there. A lot of great abolitionists. And so I spent a lot of time in that cemetery with those lilacs in undergrad.
You took me there before.
Yeah, I remember that. Here are just a couple of examples of what I'm describing here. So this is like an Egyptian art-inspired tombstone, some really old school hieroglyphics, and this is a wooden headstone that was carved out of a stump, which doesn't really last, but it's really beautiful.
The bottom right is more like a military.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the wars.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Yeah.
It says sacred to the memory of the colonel who died. Yeah, interesting.
Peak skill. Yeah. All right, so what materials are used for gravestones? There's a lot of different options and variability. What we'll talk about today with cleaning works for every kind of gravestone except wood and iron. So you wouldn't use these practices on those because they would not respond well to the biological solution, but everything else can be cleaned using these techniques. Here's just some examples. Wood, as you might expect, is porous and it rots really easily. A lot of like very, very early gravestones are wood. Same with iron, it rusts. It doesn't necessarily last. They're hardly ever used. Limestone is still used somewhat, but it is soft and porous, so it does get a lot of lichen and organic matter that grows within it. Fieldstone, some of the early colonial gravestones are just that, like large stones they found in a field that they carved inscriptions into, not done much anymore. Slate stones are still used pretty often. They're known for like fine detail on slate, so you can see the etching of that little fox is really fine. Bronze is still used all the time, so all of the plaques in Cedar Park that are military plaques are bronze. Sandstone, I love sandstone graves, they're so pretty. It is pretty soft and porous though. Same with marble. Marble is also used a lot. It's soft, it sort of like powders over time, even if you maintain it. Granite is what most people use nowadays because it is the most impermeable. Yeah, and can come in a lot of different colors and shapes and sizes. All right, so before you clean a stone, the first thing you want to do is assess the condition of the stone. This is a form that is used by a business that repairs gravestones. This is not something that I do, but I just wanted to sort of show you all of the things that could be assessed about a gravestone, the most important thing that you should know is if it's stable. Don't mess with a stone if it's not stable, if it's going to fall down, if it's going to crack because you touch it. You can do that by visibly inspecting it. You can do that by like noticing if it wobbles. If you touch it, even if it's loose on the base, just leave it alone and get an expert involved or just let it be because it's dangerous and it can also hurt the stone over time. There is a whole science of repairing and stabilizing gravestones. It's not a thing that I do. I've done very minor repairs, but again, there are companies that do this, especially for older gravestones that will either straighten them and stabilize them or actually fix repairs. There have been a number of repaired stones in Cedar Park. I don't know who did them, but it's just something to note. That could be a whole other talk. And an important aspect of this is asking permission to clean. So in Cedar Park, for example, you should know the people whose stones that you're cleaning. For me, it was a while before I had to ask permission because I have so many ancestors there. And then once I wanted to branch out, I contacted the super of the cemetery who gave me permission to clean old stones. I said I wouldn't clean anything that was under 100 years old. It's a private thing. And also, if you go on, especially to private cemeteries, you could get in a lot of trouble for doing that. So be mindful of that if you leave here and want to do that. All right, so these are the materials that I use to clean gravestones. I have them here too. So the most important part is this biological solution called D2. It eats away at the organic matter on it. And it's like biodegradable and pretty easy on the earth too. It's cool, it works over time. It's pretty expensive too. So like a bottle of this is like $18, $20 or something like that. And then a variety of different brushes. So you'll have a big brush to scrub it with. And then a smaller one, some scrapers, and there's a little skewer to really get in the letters if there's lichen in the letters. Quick process, you assess it, scrape it, spray it, scrub it, wait, and rinse. I'll show you videos of each step. Ooh, shoot. You don't need to sound for this. So first thing you're going to do is just wet the stone before you scrape it. Before you do anything, you want to make sure that it's damp so you don't scrape it off anywhere, especially if it's a more porous material. This is a stone that I cleaned last summer and recorded. This is Roberta's mom.
Roberta, Judy.
Yeah.
She was my teacher.
Oh, really? Yeah, I cleaned her stone. Yeah, tell her that her mom's stone was here. I cleaned a bunch of the Jewish cemetery last summer. Next thing you'll do is scrape it. So this is to remove any, you can see especially on the sides of this stone, all the lichen that's coming off by scraping it. This is a stone in pretty good shape. It's only 14 years old. Before you put the D2 on, just to make sure that the material is ready for the solution. So then you're going to spray it down with the D2. Just like lightly coat it all over. This is the most important part. It really makes it super clean. And then you'll rub it all in. So scrub it with the biggest brush and really like work up a lather over the whole stone. And it'll create sort of like a brown film on it that doesn't look like it's helping, but it is. And then you're going to get into finer details with the little brush and the skewer. The skewer is for the really small areas that might have organic matter growing within it. And then you got to wait. You got to wait for 10 minutes and let it cure. During this time, I usually will weed around the stone like this or clean up anything else sort of around the area that is unsightly, pick up litter, whatever else, or honor the person that is there. And then you're gonna rinse it. That's the most satisfying part at the end. This isn't even that dirty of a stone, but it's so exciting to see it sort of come to life at the end and all of the, to be clean at the end. And then you're done. Then you check your progress. So the cool thing about D2 is that it works over time. So the stone looks better a week later than it does a day later, and a month later than it does a week. It sort of gets into the pores of the stone and eats at the sort of deeper lichen and other matter that's in there. Jackie's grave took a couple of cleanings. You see it's quite dirty. And I didn't know it was gonna look so great at the end, so I love this stone.
What material of the stone is that?
His is marble.
It's marble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's pretty soft to the touch, but obviously cleans up real nice.
Yeah.
And now I like really select for marble stones because of it's so dramatic at the end.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's get another question. What's
Please.
the story with the section of the cemetery that is sort of those very like Lord of the Rings looking crypts that are built into the
Oh,
hill?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an old cemetery.
Yeah, up on the hill. Yeah, there's a bunch of mausoleums and then crypts built into the side of the hill. Yeah, those were like mostly wealthy families in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There are a lot of really cool, funky stories about those crypts and the people that they house. One of the stories, I'm going to misquote it, but I think about it all the time, is in 2013, I think it was the Evans family crypt. The family came and asked to enter it. So they wanted to see what was in there. And in the crypt was a suitcase full, that inside the suitcase was a full skeleton. And they didn't know why.
Because Kelly tells this in her
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And they didn't know
Paid
why.
$150.
And so, like, the family's bodies were all accounted for. But then there was this like skeleton in the suitcase. And so they like looked into this and they pulled the skeleton out and it was all connected via strings. And the doctor that was buried there, it was his like skeleton that he used. They buried it with him in the crypt or whatever, but it was like this major scandal in like 2013, like relatively recently. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe if you spend more money on a crypt, you get to go to heaven quicker or something?
I'm not sure, yeah.
Maybe I'll have to take you behind those, because that's where my great-grandfather from Ireland was buried.
Oh, really?
His stone is in pretty good shape.
That's
White.
awesome.
It's white.
Ooh, I love
What
that.
was his name?
Yeah.
John Dole.
John Dolan. There's a lot of Dolans in that cemetery. Yeah, that's really cool.
But it was a real skeleton.
It was a real skeleton, but used for like,
But like a
But it was the training one, all doctors.
right. Everyone had, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Everybody
nuts.
has it.
but they thought like a murder happened and they
Yeah,
hid
yeah,
it in the
yeah.
crypt and it wasn't that cool.
Because like who's gonna go in?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. No, there's a lot of cool stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. It'd be a great one. And lastly, yeah, the point that I wanted to make with this is this started out as like a really sort of pragmatic, like I'm trying to get details about my family, so I'm cleaning these stones so I can read them. And now I felt a little bit bashful to put this video of me doing Aikido in this talk, but this is family, so we're good. But yeah, this has really become like embodied somatic practice for me in that, like, especially as I've extended outwards from my ancestors to people that I don't know, whose stories I don't know, whose families I will never meet. I've really started to like sort of cultivate empathy or care for these names and these stones and like the people that mourned them at the stones. And it has been so clarifying for me, like, to really, create empathy for people that I don't know. And so, especially this year, as I try to make sense of everything that's happening in the world right now, all the lives that are being taken, who will have no grave markers, who will have no families left to mourn them, it just like feels very wrong to me in my body. It's embodied. And so whenever there's a shitstorm of politics happening, political talk, I feel like I know in my bones what is right and what is wrong. And so today, like, whatever you take from this time, I hope that you do like clean stones from here and learn more about this practice. But I would also just invite you to feel while you're doing it, to not try and numb yourself to the horrors of the world, to like an invitation into generating empathy for every human soul. that exists, because that's been an unexpected and really, really valuable part of this practice for me. So yeah, this is me with a little tiny kid who I'll never know.
3 years, 2 months.
Yeah, spending 15 minutes honoring her.
Yes.
Yeah, and it feels.
So you're gonna have a cleaning party coming up in a couple weeks?
So, I mean, I would love that. Yeah, that is a thing that I've thought about organizing a lot, and I've done it in smaller groups. So,
I'm down.
yeah, it's really fun. Yeah, it's a really fun, cool thing, and a lot of cool old stories in this cemetery.
Yeah.
All right.